Bruce, you're the cellar door manager here and the local history buff. I mean, you know everything there is to know about Tahbilk.
Only the important stuff.
Well, take us back to 1860, to the beginning of Tahbilk.
Okay, 1860, 158 years ago.
Wow.
And the property here was purchased by a group of Melbourne businessmen. Some say they didn't make their money in the gold rush, but they did see the value of the land for agriculture.
Yeah.
So they purchased the land, they planted vines to grow grapes, to make wine. They also planted olive trees for an industry there, and also planted mulberries with the intent of having a silk industry.
Right.
So the vines flourished.
Yeah.
We've still got some olive trees around the property, and we've got mulberry trees, but no silk industry.
Oh, no silk. Well, liquid gold then. Liquid
Exactly
gold,
right. So the company really flourished up until the 1880s, and that was referred to as the first golden age of Tahbilk.
Right.
And at that stage, we were the third largest winery in the colony. We weren't a nation then, that didn't happen in 1901, and exporting a lot of wine. And then also for domestic consumption as well. So by the 1880s, Tahbilk had really flourished. We were the third largest winery in the colony. We weren't a nation by that stage.
That's right.
And it was managed, and the chief winemaker, the same fellow, was a Frenchman by the name of Francois Courcelot.
Okay.
And he extended the original winery building at either end, which is why we have the French-looking tower at the southern end, and at the northern end, there is a lower-rise tower that has a lot of castlements on it.
Right,
Again, a French influence.
Right.
So that was the reasoning why there's this French-looking appeal about the place.
Okay.
After the 1880s, the place went through some difficult times. The 1890s, the 1900s were recessions and wars, and the wine industry in Australia suffered from a louse called phylloxera. It decimated the Victorian industry. And virtually all of the vineyards around here were killed off by the louse. Tahbilk has 1/2 acre block of Shiraz grapes left from the 1860s. That's all we have. Everything else has been replanted since.
Yeah, but it survived.
It survived,
Managed to
absolutely
survive.
survived, yes.
It was tough.
So the winery went through a period of decline, but it never stopped operating. It was always operating. The consortium of people eventually whittled down to just one family, the Bear family, with David Bear and his two sisters. David passed away unexpectedly and quite young, leaving control to his two sisters. And that wasn't a problem in the fact that they were ladies. The problem was they had no experience in agriculture and they happened to live in London.
Right.
So trying to run a business from afar, a little bit tough, absolutely.
Can't taste those wines.
Not a problem nowadays in the days of the internet, but back in the late 1800s, certainly a problem. So in 1925, of course, the company was purchased by Reginald Purbrick, who Melissa spoke to you about.
Right. Today's owners.
Today's owners, that's right.
And so the name has changed over time, hasn't it? And Tahbilk has an Indigenous background.
Absolutely right. So the region here is called Tahbilk,
Right.
but it's spelt differently.
Yes.
Tahbilk, the winery, has a H in it.
Right.
Tahbilk, the locality, does not have the H in it.
Yeah, I noticed that.
The H was added by the early owners as an attempt to make it sound more European.
Right.
And that's also why they called it Chateau Tahbilk.
Yes, okay.
We have kept the H, but we have dropped the chateau. So that was dropped in the year 2000, and just to move away from that French sounding names, a lot of people still refer to us as Chateau Tahbilk. Our wines are so long lived, a lot of people have Chateau Tahbilk labelled wines still in their cellars.
Wow.
So the indigenous name for Tahbilk, that actually means waterhole.
Right.
Okay, so and there were a lot of waterholes dotted around the property here.
And there's a lot of water around
There's an
now,
awful lot
isn't
of
it?
water
Goulburn
around.
River, the
That's
wetlands.
Right. Yeah. And those waterholes would be connected up when the snows melted in spring, and there'd be a flowing piece of water. But anyway, they were originally just waterholes, and Tahbilk in our indigenous language means waterhole. And when an indigenous word is repeated, it means many. So Tahbilk, many waterholes. Okay. In the 1890s, the Goulburn Weir, about 20 kilometres north of here, was built to provide irrigation water to northern Victoria. So that backed up all the waters to the south of it, because the river flowed from the south.
Right.
And that eventually just came to a point where those waterholes were eventually filled in. So it's been a permanent piece of water for a little bit over 100 years. So in terms of being a river, it's one of the youngest rivers in the world. And that's providing a lot more cooling effect here to the estate.
Right.
And we have, on average, our mesoclimate here is some 3 degrees lower than the surrounding areas.
Right.
And that adds to the quality of the grapes.
Yeah, how does that affect it?
Yeah.
How does it affect the vines?
Yeah. Where they benefit from is being cooler, they ripen slower.
Right, okay.
So it maintains the acid levels into the wines.
Yeah.
It's typically as grapes ripen, the acid levels decrease as the sugar levels increase.
Okay.
We need acid in our grapes to give it the structure and to give it the long-term benefits.
Okay, so is it considered a cool climate region?
It's interesting that the Goulburn Valley, which we're
Yeah.
a subset of, would be warm. But when we look at the actual climate data, we're very, very similar to Coonawarra in South Australia,
Right.
which is known as a cool climate area. So really, we are a cool climate area.
Right, making beautiful wines.
So a little bit of history of doing that.
Oh yes, a lot of history here, rich history, and we are in a museum.
Absolutely.
So there's got to be a lot of history if you've got one on site.
So the building we're sitting in at the moment, yes, is a Tahbilk museum. We've been very fortunate in through history that we've always had someone acting as an historian, seeking out new materials and finding things. So we have a huge amount of materials. What's on the walls in the building here is probably only 25% of what we actually have in the collection.
So where we're sitting right now is above the far end of the cellar I was just in.
Absolutely right, yes.
It's all connected.
Yes, it is.
Wow. Does this date back to 1862?
Not quite the 1860s, but certainly the 1880s. The general manager I mentioned earlier on, Francois Cousselot, he built the building here as part of his extensions.
Yep.
And he was also a spiritualist, so he conducted services here in the building.
Okay.
It was never actually consecrated as a church, so it can't be called that.
Yeah.
But it's had many uses here at Tahbilk
Yeah.
over the time. It's been a meeting hall, it's been for spiritual services, it's been a storeroom, and now we use it as the museum.
As a museum, wow.
And we have a tremendous amount of materials. We have maps going back to when the land was actually proclaimed with Tahbilk. There's titles of deeds. There's photographs of the various people throughout the history. Tremendous amount of history here.
I've learned so much from you today. Thank you so much,
Most
Bruce.
welcome.
But you know what? I've been waiting to try that wine, so...
Well, I'm thinking that all this history only relates to one thing, absolute quality wine. So I think we should go try some.
You're right.